Politics is often described as the art of navigating contradictions, but what we are witnessing today is less art and more opportunism, less conviction and more choreography. The cacophony surrounding Sir Keir Starmer's recent trip to Saudi Arabia exemplifies this trend, exposing not just the malleability of political principles but also the audacity of politicians to assume the public's memory is as short as their own campaign promises. Starmer's visit is not merely a reflection of shifting priorities. It is a glaring indictment of the moral inconsistency embedded in the political establishment. Let's be clear, nobody disputes the importance of securing international investment, particularly amid the economic quagmire Britain finds itself in. Yet, the hypocrisy here is staggering. In 2022, Starmer excoriated Boris Johnson for what he called going cap in hand from dictator to dictator, referring to Johnson's visit to Saudi Arabia. Angela Rayner, now Starmer's deputy, didn't mince her words either, labeling it a begging mission. Fast forward to 2024, and Starmer is doing precisely what he once condemned, albeit cloaked in lofty rhetoric about economic growth and international diplomacy. The doublespeak is nauseating, but what's worse is the brazenness with which it is deployed. The Labour Party's defence, that this trip does not preclude raising human rights concerns, is as hollow as it is predictable. Just how credible is the claim that Starmer will challenge Mohammed bin Salman, a leader notorious for his regime's brutality, while simultaneously courting his billions? Diplomacy demands pragmatism, yes, but pragmatism without principle is nothing more than moral bankruptcy. If Starmer fails to publicly address the grotesque human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia, including the execution of over 300 people this year alone, his so-called commitment to values will be exposed for what it is, a convenient facade. This is not an isolated incident. It is part of a broader pattern of political malleability that has come to define the Labour Party under Starmer's leadership. Whether it's Rachel Reeves cozying up to the EU while dismissing the legitimate post-Brexit concerns of millions, or Angela Rayner greenlighting the demolition of heritage buildings while Labour donors scoff at preserving history on life support, the message is clear: principles are expendable when power is at stake. Labour's leadership seems more concerned with optics than outcomes, with managing headlines rather than addressing the root causes of Britain's malaise. Consider the winter fuel payments debacle. Labour's decision to cut these payments for certain groups, at a time when the cost of living crisis is forcing vulnerable people to choose between heating and eating, is indefensible. The backlash has been swift, epitomized by the biting parody song Freezing This Christmas, which has struck a chord with the public. While the party scrambles to frame this as a necessary step for economic balance, the reality is that it reeks of detachment from the struggles of ordinary citizens. The optics of a prime minister jetting around the globe while pensioners freeze at home is not just bad politics, it is a moral failing. And then there is the looming spectre of Labour's relationship with the European Union. Reeves's recent speech to the Eurogroup signals an unmistakable pivot toward deeper integration with the bloc, a move that will undoubtedly alienate the millions who voted for Brexit in good faith. Her rhetoric about resetting relations with Europe and unlocking economic potential may play well in Brussels, but it underscores a troubling willingness to sideline the sovereignty concerns that defined the Brexit vote. Worse still, her remarks come at a time when the EU itself has shown blatant disregard for British interests, as evidenced by the recent Mercosur trade deal and the Falklands map fiasco. Is this the partner Reeves is so eager to embrace? The contradictions don't end there. Labour's handling of the Syrian refugee crisis is another example of its inability, or unwillingness, to balance compassion with pragmatism. While the fall of Assad's regime presents an opportunity for refugees to rebuild their homeland, Labour appears paralysed, torn between the demands of international human rights groups and domestic pressures to limit immigration. This indecision is symptomatic of a party that wants to appear principled without taking the hard, often unpopular, decisions that true leadership requires. The Conservative Party is by no means blameless in this political theatre. Their internal squabbles, from Robert Jenrick's push to ban first-cousin marriages to their tepid responses to Labour's policy missteps, reveal a party that is as fractured as it is fatigued. But pointing fingers at Conservative incompetence does not absolve Labour of its own failures. If anything, it heightens the urgency for a credible alternative, a role Labour is failing to fulfil. What Britain needs right now is not a government that oscillates between opportunism and platitudes, but one that is anchored in unwavering principles. The stakes are too high for performative politics. The cost of living crisis is deepening, social cohesion is fraying, and Britain's place on the world stage is increasingly uncertain. A leader who cannot reconcile their actions with their words, who says one thing in opposition and does another in power, is not a leader at all. They are a tactician, and Britain deserves better. Labour's current trajectory under Starmer is a cautionary tale of what happens when ambition supersedes authenticity. The party may believe that its calculated compromises are the price of electability, but it risks alienating the very electorate it seeks to win over. The British public is not as gullible as political elites often assume. They see through the spin, the contradictions, and the moral gymnastics. And when the time comes, they will render their verdict, not just on Labour, but on a political class that has consistently underestimated their intelligence and overestimated its own cleverness. In politics, credibility is everything. Without it, even the most ambitious plans and eloquent speeches are doomed to fail. Starmer and his party would do well to remember this, before their moral inconsistency becomes their political undoing.